I wasn't planning to be home that day. It was supposed to be a regular Thursday. I had a quarterly team meeting 2 cities over, a hotel booked, and I had even packed a suit for the first time in 6 months. But a pipe burst at the event center overnight, and the conference got canceled last minute. I didn't even text Emily to tell her I was coming back. I figured I'd surprise her, maybe bring lunch from that Thai place she liked, the one she always said was too spicy but kept going back to. I walked into our house around 11:45 a.m., keys jangling like always, expecting the usual emptiness of a weekday at home. Except it wasn't empty. There was her purse on the kitchen counter. Not just any purse. The small one, the crossbody she only ever took when she was going out, not the big one she carried to work. I stared at it like it was a gun left out in plain sight. Right next to it, a bottle of red wine already uncorked. 2 glasses. Half full. I didn't hear anything at first, no voices, no music, no movement, so I stood there, my mind scrambling to make it make sense. Maybe she came home sick. Maybe a friend dropped by. Maybe she was on lunch break and forgot to text me. Maybe. I moved through the kitchen like I was sneaking through someone else's house. My shoes felt too loud on the tile. I set the takeout down on the table without thinking and made my way toward the hallway. That's when I heard it. A laugh. Muffled. Not hers. Low, masculine. Then a soft thud. Then hers. Unmistakable. Light. A little breathy. The kind of laugh she used to give me when we were still in that glow of the first year. I didn't rush. I didn't slam open doors or scream her name. I walked to the bedroom door like I already knew what was on the other side, because part of me did. It was open just an inch. Enough to see without being seen. Enough to watch him, some guy in jeans and no shirt, chasing her around the bed like they were teenagers. She was barefoot, wearing one of my button-up shirts, the one I hadn't been able to find for weeks. It was unbuttoned and falling off one shoulder. She squealed and ducked behind the bed as he lunged, and then he caught her, and she wrapped her arms around his neck like it was second nature. Like it had happened before. Like this was just another day. I should have walked in right then. Should have yelled, broken something, kicked him out, and made her explain it all with a bloody lip and mascara tears. But I didn't. I stood there and watched them collapse onto our bed, my bed, the one we picked out together at the showroom downtown, the one we laughed about because it squeaked during the trial. I watched him kiss her neck, and I watched her eyes flutter like I used to make them do. Then I turned and walked back to the kitchen. When she finally came downstairs 20 minutes later, still wearing my shirt, her hair tied up differently than when I arrived, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the Thai food untouched in front of me. She froze mid-step. I was going wide like a deer caught doing something very, very wrong. I didn't look up from the table. Didn't think you'd be home, she said finally, voice brittle. I noticed. She walked to the counter slowly, trying to act normal, maybe hoping I hadn't seen enough. She picked up her purse and held it to her chest like it could protect her. Why didn't you say something? I wanted to see what I'd find before I asked questions. That's when the blood drained from her face, when the weight of what I knew finally clicked in her head. She glanced at the hallway, toward the stairs, then back at me. You don't understand it. I understand fine. Let me just. I was gone for 4 hours. 4. And you couldn't wait that long to forget you were married. She blinked, but no tears came. She wasn't crying. Not yet. She wasn't even sorry. Not yet. She was just trying to figure out how much I knew and how much she could still lie about. You weren't supposed to be here, she said finally, like that made any of it better. Like my presence was the problem. I wasn't. But your purse was. She looked at it like it had betrayed her too. Who is he? I asked, finally meeting her eyes. She hesitated. Nobody you know. That's not what I asked. Her jaw clenched. She didn't answer. I nodded once, stood up, and walked past her. I didn't yell. I didn't touch her. I didn't look back. Where are you going? She asked, voice high, tight, like the panic was just now settling in. To get answers. Don't bother cleaning up the wine. And I left her standing there, barefoot, in my shirt, next to a half-empty bottle of wine and a purse that was never supposed to be there. I didn't go far. Just sat in my car in the driveway with the engine off, letting the silence take over while I stared through the windshield at absolutely nothing. I wasn't even angry yet. It was like my brain was still waiting for the rest of the information before it sent out the orders. All I had was that still image in my head of her laughing in my shirt, with some guy who knew exactly where to put his hands. She had looked comfortable with him. Familiar. That was the part that sat the worst with me. This wasn't some random mistake. This was something that had been practiced. Repeated. Scheduled. I checked my dash clock. It had only been 15 minutes, maybe 20. I could have stayed out there for an hour, but I wasn't interested in watching him leave like nothing happened. I wanted to know what was going on. I wanted details, facts, timelines. I wanted to know who had been inside my house, inside my bedroom, while I was planning future vacations and picking up groceries for someone who apparently saw me as background noise. I walked around the side of the house, staying close to the fence line, and slipped through the back door that I always kept unlocked when I was doing yard work. The house was quiet again, like it had erased what happened upstairs. I heard the faint thud of feet, drawers opening, maybe someone dressing in a hurry. I didn't go to the kitchen or the living room. I went to the garage. We had a small cabinet by the wall, one of those utility ones meant for random junk, and inside was the thing I needed. It was just a basic home security recorder. Nothing special, just a cheap unit I had installed myself 2 years ago when someone keyed Emily's car in the driveway. It wasn't connected to an app, didn't stream to the cloud, and she didn't even remember it existed. I turned it off months ago, but never removed the camera above the back door. Last week, when we had a small break-in scare down the street, I flipped the power back on just in case. And now I was glad I did. I pulled the small hard drive, pocketed it, and made sure everything else looked untouched. Then I went back inside and stood at the base of the stairs, listening. There was a voice. Male. Calm, but hurried. I heard a zipper. The guy was getting ready to leave. I heard her voice too. Whispering. Urgent. Like they were planning an exit strategy. I didn't go up. Not yet. I went to the living room and sat down like I was waiting for a package. 5 minutes later, footsteps crept down the stairs. I saw her first. Emily. She froze when she saw me, holding the railing like it was the only thing keeping her upright. The guy was 2 steps behind her. Short brown hair. Probably mid-30s. Black polo shirt. I looked him dead in the eye. He didn't flinch. Didn't apologize. He looked at me like I was a neighbor catching him walking the wrong dog. I'm gonna head out, he said, like we were all in on the same joke. Didn't know you were home. I didn't respond. Didn't move. Just watched him walk past me and out the door. He didn't rush. He knew he wasn't in danger. I wasn't giving him that satisfaction. She followed him with her eyes, then turned back to me like she had to decide what version of herself she was about to be. You weren't supposed to see that, she said, and I hated how normal her voice sounded. Who is he? I asked again, like maybe I'd get a better answer this time. She took a few steps into the room, but didn't sit. He works at the gym. He's just someone I know. It's not serious. How long? She looked down, jaw tightening. A few months. Since the new workout schedule? She nodded once, I still on the floor. Why? I didn't yell it. I didn't want noise. I wanted to hear her say it with clarity, with all the discomfort it deserved. I don't know, she said, and then added quickly, it just happened. I didn't plan it. You brought him here, I said, voice flat. To our house. That's not something that just happens. I didn't think you'd be home. That's not an answer. She paused, then looked up at me. I was lonely. You were always working. We stopped talking. I felt invisible. I stood up. So you decided the fix for that was screwing some guy and hiding it until it exploded in your face? No, You think this is about talking? You think this is because I work too much? You could have said something. You could have told me you weren't okay. You could have left. You didn't have to lie every day. I didn't mean to hurt you. Then why do I feel like you meant all of it? She had no answer for that. She just stood there, stuck between explanations and silence, trying to gauge which one would get her out of this faster. I pulled the small drive from my pocket and held it up. What's that? Insurance. For what? For whatever happens next. She didn't move. Didn't ask to see it. She just stood there, watching me walk past her, holding the proof of what she did like a receipt for something she wanted to return. I didn't speak to her for the rest of the day. Not a word. I left the house around 3, drove without a real destination, and ended up at a coffee shop on the edge of town that I hadn't been to since we were still dating. It had changed ownership, looked more modern now, but the layout was the same. I sat in the back corner with a black coffee and plugged the security drive into my laptop. I didn't want to watch it, but I needed to. I needed to be certain. What I saw confirmed every suspicion. He'd been there before. More than once. Always around the same time, always looking casual, like he had a reason to be there. A quick kiss by the door. Her pulling him in by the hand. Her laughter as she looked over her shoulder. She'd gotten comfortable with it, with him, with all of it. That made it worse. It wasn't some nervous mistake she regretted afterward. It was routine. The more I watched, the less angry I felt and the more focused I became. Anger was useless. Anger didn't change anything. But action, that was something I could control. I copied the videos, organized them by date, and made notes. Not because I wanted to shame her, but because I needed clarity. The whole picture. I wanted to know just how long I had been the background noise to someone else's story. By the time I left the coffee shop, the sky was turning orange and I hadn't responded to any messages. I had 4 missed calls from Emily. 2 texts. Nothing long, just asking where I was, when I'd be back, and if we could talk. I didn't reply. I didn't plan to. I went to a friend's place, Matt, someone I'd known since high school, who had gone through his own divorce a few years earlier. I hadn't told him anything yet, but as soon as he opened the door and saw my face, he stepped aside and waved me in without asking a thing. I told him everything. The surprise return, the purse, the bedroom scene, the guy's blank expression, and the footage. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he didn't try to soften it or offer a silver lining. "So what are you going to do?" he asked after a pause. "I don't know yet. I can't just sit there pretending like things are fine." "You going to kick her out?" "I want to. But I don't want her walking out with everything. I need to play it smart." Matt leaned back in his chair and looked at me carefully. "You want to hurt her back?" I thought about that. Not physically. Not in some irrational way. But yes, part of me wanted her to feel something, regret, guilt, the sting of realizing what she threw away. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I didn't want her to beg. I wanted her to look at me and finally understand what she destroyed. "Yeah," I said. "I do." That night, I stayed in Matt's spare room. I didn't sleep much. My brain kept cycling through memories that now felt fake. I remembered our anniversary trip 2 months ago. The dinner. The wine. The way she smiled at me while holding my hand across the table. I had no idea she was already involved with someone else. I replayed the last few weeks, every moment she had left early for the gym or come home late from running errands. It all made sense now, and it made me feel like a fool. The next morning, I went back to the house around 8. She was in the kitchen, already dressed, probably planning to head to work and pretend like nothing happened. When she saw me, she froze mid-step, holding her coffee like a shield. "You didn't answer me," she said softly. "I didn't want to. Can we talk now?" "No. You're gonna listen." She nodded, setting the mug down on the counter. "I don't care what reasons you think justify this. You lied. You cheated. You brought someone into our home. And now you want to patch it up because you got caught." "I don't want to patch it up," she said. "I just want to explain. I don't need an explanation. I need honesty. And you're not capable of that." I didn't mean to fall into it. It just kept going. "You made it go. You scheduled it. You let it grow. That wasn't an accident." She looked away, biting her lip, probably realizing how little she had to say in her defense. "I'm not sure what happens next," I continued. "But I know I'm not going to be the guy who lets this slide. You broke this. And now I'm going to decide what I want from the pieces." "I understand." "No, I don't think you do. But you will." She didn't ask what that meant. She just stood there, as if waiting for the verdict. I didn't give her one. Not yet. I stayed in the house for the next 3 days, but we didn't speak unless we had to. Meals were eaten separately, rooms were avoided, and the silence in between was heavy but necessary. Emily walked around like she was waiting for something, like I was supposed to explode or cry or fall apart, but I didn't give her that. I made coffee in the morning, answered emails, cleaned up my inbox, and reviewed the recordings when she wasn't home. She tried twice to talk to me. Both times I told her not now. Both times she said okay and walked away like she understood, but I could tell it was eating at her that I hadn't broken down the way she expected. On the 4th day, I called off work, logged out of everything, and started executing what I had spent 2 nights planning. I started with her parents. I invited them to the house, told them I wanted to speak privately without Emily around, and they came, looking concerned and curious. I didn't ease into it. I sat them down at the kitchen table and showed them the footage. At first, they didn't say much. Her father leaned back, arms crossed, staring at the screen while her mother gasped softly and kept looking at me like I was a victim on the news. When it ended, I paused the frame, left it on the screen, and waited. "I'm sorry," her mother said finally, the words dragging out like they hurt to say. "I don't know what to say, really. I'm not asking for sympathy," I told her. "I just wanted you to see it for yourselves. Before I make my next move, I want the people around her to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing." Her father didn't look at me when he spoke. "You gonna tell everyone?" "Not everyone. Just the people who need to know." They sat in silence for another minute. Then they nodded and left. I didn't expect them to pick sides, but now they couldn't say they didn't know the truth. That was the point. Next was her job. I printed the security stills and copies of the timeline and had them sent anonymously to HR. I didn't include her name, but I knew it wouldn't take long for them to figure it out. The man she'd been with worked at the same gym where Emily taught evening yoga classes once a week. He was part of their outreach team. Company policies were clear: no relationships between staff during client hours, no exceptions. I didn't care if she got fired. I wasn't aiming for that. I just wanted her to see how it felt when your actions weren't invisible anymore. Then I went through our finances. Quietly, carefully. I contacted a lawyer, explained everything, sent them the evidence. They assured me I had more than enough leverage. We had a shared account and some investments, but the lawyer told me exactly what to do to protect myself. The next day, I moved half of the shared funds to a new account and froze any future transactions. I didn't tell her. I wanted her to feel it when her card got declined for the first time. Not because I needed to humiliate her, but because I wanted her to stop thinking I was just going to take it. When I finally confronted her directly, it wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was practical. "You're gonna move out," I told her while she was in the kitchen putting dishes away. She didn't even turn around. "When?" "Soon. I'm giving you until the end of the week." "Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't care." She set the plate down a little too hard and faced me. "You think this is easy for me?" "I hope it's not. I didn't do this to destroy everything. It wasn't supposed to go this far. You kept going. You had chances to stop. You made this a routine. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You think punishing me makes you feel better?" "I'm not punishing you. I'm removing you. From your life. From my house. From my time. From the version of my life that pretended you were loyal." She didn't cry. Not even then. She just looked at me like she didn't know who I was anymore, and maybe that was fair. Because I wasn't the version of me that let things slide. Not anymore. Later that night, she asked if we could talk again. I let her sit on the opposite side of the living room while I stayed in the chair by the window. She talked for 15 minutes straight. Apologies. Excuses. Half reasons about our lack of connection and her loneliness and the slow drift she felt over the past year. I didn't interrupt. I let her get it all out. When she was done, I asked her one question. "If I hadn't caught you, would it still be going?" She didn't answer right away. And that was all I needed. She didn't pack much. A couple of suitcases, a box of toiletries, and the essentials. No framed photos, no decorations, none of the things we picked out together that once made the house feel like ours. She moved through the place like a guest trying not to leave a mess. I stayed out of her way, only stepping into the kitchen once while she was filling a small box with spices and glass containers. She glanced up, probably expecting a comment, but I just grabbed a bottle of water and left. That was 2 days before the move-out deadline. The night before she left, she knocked on my office door around 10. I hadn't expected her to say anything, but she stood there for a few seconds, unsure, and then asked if we could have one last conversation. I let her in, mostly out of curiosity. She sat across from me and didn't start right away. Her eyes looked tired, like she hadn't slept well in days. I waited, arms crossed, leaning back slightly. "I don't know how to start this," she said, looking around like the words might be hidden in the corners of the room. "Everything I say just sounds worse than silence." "Then don't talk for the sake of talking. Say something that matters." She nodded slowly, taking that in. "I never thought this is where we'd end up. No one does. But here we are. I was selfish. I got bored. I got lazy. I thought maybe something new would wake me up again. So I was what? A placeholder." "No," she said quickly, leaning forward. "You were never that. You've been everything stable, everything consistent. And I guess I took that for granted. I didn't realize what that kind of love costs when it's not shiny anymore." "Did you love him?" "No. I don't even think I liked him that much. It was just, he looked at me like I mattered, and I liked that feeling. You know what I did for you, right? All these years. Everything from the smallest routine to the biggest compromises. I gave you a life you didn't have to question." "I know," she said, her voice low. "And I ruined it. You didn't just ruin it. You mocked it. You spat on it every time he was in this house." She didn't argue. That silence meant she finally understood there was no version of this where she walked away with dignity intact. "I know you think I don't deserve forgiveness, and you're probably right," she added. "I'm not thinking about forgiveness. I'm thinking about how to make peace with losing someone who looked me in the face every day and lied without flinching. There was a long pause, and then she took a breath and said something I didn't expect. I don't want a divorce. I stared at her, confused for a second. You cheated. You lied. You watched this fall apart in real time. And now you want to stay. I'm not asking for everything to go back to normal. I just don't want to throw away the life we've built. I want to fix it, even if it takes years. Fix what? I asked, raising my voice just enough. You think trust grows back like a plant? You think if I just wake up enough mornings without thinking about what happened in that bedroom, this'll all go away? No. But I don't want to give up on us without trying. That's all I'm saying. I stood up, walked to the other side of the room, trying to settle the storm rising in my chest. I didn't want to yell. I didn't want to break anything. I just needed to make it clear. You want to stay for comfort, not for love. You want to avoid the embarrassment, the questions, the loneliness. You don't want me. You want the safety I represent. That's not true, she said, but the way her voice cracked gave it away. It is. And you know it. I do still love you, she said, standing now, stepping toward me. Even if I don't deserve you anymore. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. I let her stand there and wait for something that wouldn't come. You'll find someone else, she added. You're the kind of man people trust. That won't change. I laughed under my breath, not because it was funny, but because it was the first honest thing she had said in a while. I turned to her, finally ready to give her the only thing she seemed to really want, an ending. You're going to leave tomorrow. You'll take your bags and go stay wherever you've arranged. After that, we'll figure out how to split everything legally. There won't be a war. I won't trash your name. I won't post anything. But don't call me. Don't show up. Don't try to fix what's dead. Her face went pale, but she nodded. Okay. And if he reaches out to you again, don't pretend I'll care. You made your choices. Just live with them. That was it. She left my office, didn't come back to say goodnight, didn't try to explain anything else. And I sat in the silence of that room for a long time after, not because I was sad, but because I was finally certain of what I needed to do. She left early the next morning. I heard the soft drag of her suitcase wheels on the hallway floor and the quiet click of the front door closing behind her. No note, no goodbye, just the final act of a decision that had been made weeks before I ever knew anything was wrong. I stood by the window, out of her sight, and watched her load her things into the back of a small silver hatchback I didn't recognize. She didn't look back once. I didn't expect her to. I didn't feel relief when she drove away. I didn't feel sadness. I felt still. And after everything that had happened, that stillness was the closest thing to peace I'd felt in a long time. The rest of that day, I cleaned the house. Not because it was messy, but because I needed it to stop looking like a space we shared. I took down the framed photos from our last trip together, boxed up her tea collection from the pantry, and scrubbed every surface in the bedroom until nothing smelled like her. It wasn't rage that pushed me to do it. It was clarity. I wasn't trying to erase her. I was just finally ready to reclaim the space I had given away without knowing it. It felt like starting from zero, and I was fine with that. I wanted zero. Later that night, Matt came over with a six-pack and a pizza. He didn't say anything when he saw the empty spots on the walls or the boxes by the door. He just sat down and passed me a beer. So it's done, he asked after a few minutes. Yeah, she's gone. And it's quiet. That's usually how it starts. We ate. We watched a dumb action movie, and we didn't talk much after that. It was exactly the kind of evening I needed. Nothing deep, nothing dramatic. Just normal. Just time moving forward without dragging me behind it. When he left, I sat on the couch and thought about what had changed. The house was the same. My job was the same. But I felt different. Not in some profound way. Just sharper. Like a part of me had finally accepted something I'd avoided for too long. People don't always love you back the way you love them. And that has nothing to do with your worth. A week later, I got a message from her. Not long, just a few lines asking if we could meet for coffee, to talk about how we wanted to handle the legal stuff. I said yes because it was easier than drawing it out. We met at a place halfway between our house and wherever she was staying. She looked tired, thinner, like she hadn't eaten or slept properly in days. I didn't ask how she was. I just waited for her to speak. I'm not going to fight you on anything, she said, stirring a cup of tea she probably wouldn't drink. Whatever you want, I'll sign. Why? Because I broke it. I don't get to be picky about how it ends. I nodded, appreciating the honesty even if it came too late. You seeing him still? I asked. No. Because it's over? Or because you know it'd make this worse? Both. I don't care either way. I'm just curious. She looked down at her tea, then back at me. He was never anything real. It was just something I used to distract myself. From what? From feeling like I'd stopped mattering to you. You could have said something. I know. I didn't want to seem needy. I didn't want to be the one who cracked first. Well, now you're the one who cracked everything. She didn't argue. She signed the papers, handed them back, and stood up. I followed her to the parking lot. There was no handshake, no hug, no final look. She got in her car, drove off, and that was it. It's been a few months now. I changed the locks, painted the bedroom, sold the bed, and bought one that doesn't creak in the same places. I don't check her social media. I don't ask mutual friends for updates. I deleted every picture we ever took together from my phone. I kept one, the very first one, from the day we moved into the house. Not because I miss her. I don't. I kept it to remind myself that even when things seem perfect, they can still fall apart if you stop paying attention. I'm not bitter. I'm not waiting for karma. I'm just building something different now. Not better, not worse, just mine. A life where I don't have to guess what's real. A life where silence doesn't mean secrets. A life that belongs to me. And I'm okay with that. I really am.